Hello everyone. In today's video series, we're going to be looking at a collection of videos. This one is what I would do differently and specifically focused on refurbishments. So I've been investing in property since 2005. And in that time, I've purchased properties across the whole of the Northwest, purchased all different types of properties. And in this series, I want to touch on those things that with that knowledge, 15 years on, what I would do differently to hopefully help you make or not make the same mistakes. So refurbishment is quite a challenging subject, and it's not something that everybody wants to be doing when they're buying a buy-to-let property. You do find very often it falls into one of two camps. Investors that are really pro refurbishments, they want to get hands on, they want to buy a property, add value, and do lots of work to it. You'll then find other investors that want absolutely nothing to do with refurbishments, and I wholly get both kind of camps. And very often the reasons being is because of the uncertainty around what a refurbishment might require in terms of time and resources, and certainly financial resources and cost, and also how to find the right team members. It's very difficult to build a team in any business, but specifically with refurbishments, if you don't want to do refurbishments, then it's usually because you don't have any experience with it. So you're starting completely from scratch. You may not have any contact from the industry, you may not have any knowledge at all within the industry, so have no idea whether work is good, bad, or indifferent when it's done. So it's important to kind of consider the nuances and which kind of camp you might fall under. But then in addition to that, with my experience with refurbishments, hopefully I can bring some value on other things to maybe steer clear of and other things to kind of consider when you are buying properties to refurbish. And the first one of those is to really consider, even if you are doing refurbishments, if you want to be doing it yourself, so sort of DIY, or if you're going to be using professionals. My strong advice would be to use a professional in all aspects of your property business, specifically when it comes to refurbishments. And there's a number of reasons for that. But if you consider, for example, doing a large scale refurbishment, and by that I mean buying a property that needs everything doing to it. So you could consider your kitchen, your bathroom, for example, and painting, recarpeting, obviously, but maybe new, not just new decoration, but electrics, plumbing, central heating, things like that, joinery work as well. There's going to be a whole host of different moving parts with managing that refurbishment process. And maybe you're really handy. Maybe you've got lots of experience with doing one particular aspect, but trying to relearn those aspects yourself just very often isn't an efficient use of time. And I understand it from a context of, okay, you can maybe make more income from a particular property or return or profit on one particular property if you're doing everything because you're saving costs on spending on labor, for example. But the problem with that is that very often there's an opportunity cost. Your time could be better spent doing other things, but also that project could run on. If you've got one person doing a whole refurbishment or a couple of people doing a whole refurbishment, it's going to take much longer than if you've got a couple of experts running that project and they can get it done to a professional standard in and out very quick. You can then rent that property and start generating an income from it much faster. So I would hazard against doing DIY refurbishments unless you have a good skill set that you already are able to utilize, and also you have experts around you. I would always go the professional routes. And then one further word of caution, when I first kind of started and I wanted to look at maybe some of the DIY aspects, I'm not very good at DIY. So it's not a good idea for me to be kind of starting that anyway. And what I ended up doing was buying a load of tools that I never ended up using because I had no idea what to do with it. So after many kind of evenings and weekends of trying to figure out how to do something, I ended up going back to kind of square one effectively and using kind of professionals to do that refurbishment anyway. So when it comes to refurbs, absolutely work with professionals on day one. Try not to kind of do too much DIY. I think it's a better use of your time to focus on other aspects of your property portfolio and business. The second thing that I would do differently when it comes to not just managing refurbishments, but fundamentally having refurbishments done on properties is the understanding that if you have a property portfolio, you are going to have maintenance required on that property. Whether you have one property, 10 properties, 100 properties, you're going to have things that need looking after, things that go wrong, things that need looking at on a regular basis. And I would say from day one, you want to have a very good team of contacts to manage your refurbishments and manage your general maintenance. So having a general joiner, for example, that's very good at running key aspects of a property management is what we find. That particular skill set seems to translate quite nicely to one, doing general maintenance, but two, also managing a team of contacts. So if you've not yet got any team members within your team, I wouldn't just rely on contacts from maybe your letting agent. I would also try and find another individual that you can use to be on hand if you do have any particular problems with ongoing maintenance on a particular property. Somebody that you've seen their work, you trust their work, and that's possibly come on recommendation, but that you have kind of readiness really, that when that time comes, you do need to do some work on a property, you've got an easy contact there to call. So the second thing I would consider is, rather than kind of waiting for things to happen within that property, you know things are going to happen. So make sure you have your maintenance team ready to go and you have those contacts ready to go for that time. So third up in refurbishments, what I would do differently, and that is have a range of contacts to work with on day one, as quick as possible. So when I first started out, I didn't know much about the refurbishment side, and I had one core team that I was very heavily reliant on. They were very good. They were very fast, the quality was really good, and the prices were really good. So there's no reason really to start looking around for other team members. But what you find sometimes, or certainly my experience with refurbishments, is that over a longer period of time, there's more chance for things to potentially go wrong. And so quality might slip. If a team member comes in or out of that crew, for example, you might have an issue with potential quality. Prices might increase. So if they become very busy and they can then start to increase their prices, you may start to see an increase in your costs for general maintenance or for refurbishments. And then also reliability. If they're taking on lots and lots of work, it can become very difficult for them to prioritize your job over something else, irrespective of how long you might be working with them. So what I'd say is, on day one, yes, it's important to find a reliable team to run your refurbishments, but it's also critical that you have a plan B. Have another team ready to go. And that doesn't have to be a team that's kind of just waiting there and it's costing you kind of money in any way, but certainly team members, individual trades that you've been speaking to throughout, that you have their contact details, you've seen their work, you've seen their standards, maybe discussed costs and stuff with them as well. So you know they're a fit for you. So when that time does come, if you need somebody to step in, if you need somebody to help out, if for any reason you need to push a project forward and you need another team to come and assist with that, you have everything ready to go. It's really problematic to be in a situation where you're reliant on one company, one crew, and something goes wrong on the project, and then you have to start everything from day one. It's very stressful to go out and try and find a new team or a new individual to come onto a project when you're halfway through, when everything needs kind of looking at, because time really isn't on your side. Then it's much easier, simpler, efficient and better to do that at the beginning. So having more than one team, I would recommend as a backup, so that you have those individuals ready to go when the time is right. And then as a final roundup for things I would do differently with refurbishments is understanding a little bit tighter contingencies and what your margin of error might need to be within a particular property. Because unfortunately, with the refurbishments, there's plenty of things that can go wrong and very often do go wrong. So it's going to require more resources, both in terms of physical team members and then also budgets. It's going to possibly take longer to do a project. And how is that going to impact your budgeting, your forecasting? Contingency planning is massive. And I think it's very important, if you're doing a refurbishment, to have not just a plan, but have a plan A and B, and possibly even a plan C. So a best case, a worst case, and then a considered sort of middle case scenario of what is likely to happen on that particular project. Because very often people don't build in any contingency, not just in terms of cost, but in terms of time. What happens if you're doing a project and it overruns, especially if you've got things like bridging finance or other lending on a property, that can become very problematic very fast. So having a contingency plan is very important. Having a contingency budget is also very important. So some people consider no budget, some people consider 5 to 10% maybe. Average might be sort of 10 to 15%. I would recommend, certainly on a worst case scenario, stress testing that. So can you stress test that project to 20%, for example? Does that property still work then? If it doesn't, then maybe there's a problem there. Maybe you're spending a bit too much on the purchase of the property, or maybe your expectations on what you're going to sell or rent that property on need to be readjusted. Because if you can't make that property work with worst case scenario planning, then there may be something that you need to kind of consider as to how you can do that. What other ways can you improve that project, improve that property, so that you can make everything tick over nicely on your worst case scenario planning? So contingency plate, I would say, is massive. And contingency being team members, we've spoken about that before, about having more than just one person. Contingency being budget, making sure that you have a contingency budget set aside. And contingency being time. What happens if that project overruns? Are you okay? You're still in a good position. Does it make a difference to how you would then plan to sell or rent that property? Because it all kind of impact on your property kind of planning. So it's good to have a contingency there. Hope that helps. And if you've got any questions at all, please feel free to ask. I look forward to catching up with you in the next video in this series.